Good afternoon. All right. Everybody can hear me okay, though, it sounds like.
Surrounding the Ways and Means chair. I love it. Staging a coup. Perfect. And they've extracted some of We're good.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us today. My name is David Trulio, and I'm the new president and CEO of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. In 1991, when President Reagan stood very close to where we're standing right now to officially open the Reagan Presidential Library and Museum, he stated that his hope was for the Reagan Library to become, quote, a dynamic intellectual forum, unquote, not only for scholars to interpret the past, but also for policymakers to debate the future. Earlier today, we had the unique opportunity to host a bipartisan meeting between members of the United States House of Representatives, led by Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and Tsai Ing-wen, the President of Taiwan, and her delegation. Today's engagements are a wonderful example of how President Reagan's vision for this library is being fulfilled. Ronald Reagan believed passionately in freedom and democracy, not simply for Americans, but for all people around the globe. Before becoming president, he traveled to Taiwan on 2 occasions. And it was President Reagan's administration in 1982 that developed what became known as the 6 Assurances, a framework that to this day forms a key part of the foundation of how relations between the United States and Taiwan are conducted. We are deeply honored and grateful that Speaker McCarthy brought today's bipartisan meeting to the Reagan Library. The Speaker's district is not that far from us here in Simi Valley, and he has consistently taken the time to support what we do here, from participating in our Reagan National Defense Forum and also giving keynote remarks as part of our Center for Public Affairs programming. Of significant note, in 2021, Speaker McCarthy tweeted, and I quote, "Ronald Reagan is, in large part, the reason I am a Republican." So it is my privilege to invite to the microphone a long-standing friend of the Reagan Foundation, the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy.
Thank you, David. And he's 1 week on the job, and he already brought us together. Bipartisan. Well done. Look forward to much more greatness there. No better place to be seated today. And to the members behind me, thank you for coming. And if you notice, as not members of one party, we're here united together in a very important issue. I want to thank all of you for being here as well. It's great to be joined by so many members of both parties at the Reagan Library. And it is a fitting place to have such a discussion, given President Reagan's commitment to the people of Taiwan. President Reagan's 6 Assurances serves as the backbone of our relationship with the people of Taiwan. The members here today make clear we take our support for the people of Taiwan seriously and are determined to speak with one voice. The relationship between the people of the United States and Taiwan have never been stronger in my lifetime. We had a very productive discussion with the President of Taiwan today. We covered the crucial ways to further our bonds. Based on our conversations, it's clear that there are several actions are necessary. First, we must continue the arms sales to Taiwan and make sure such sales reach Taiwan on a very timely basis. Second, we must strengthen our economic cooperation, particularly with trade and technology. Third, we must continue to promote our shared values on the world stage. We live in a decisive moment in history and must act with urgency. Tension in the world are at this highest point since the end of the Cold War. As authoritarian leaders seek to use violence and fear to provoke needless conflict. The bond between the people of America and Taiwan is foundational and long-standing. Together, our people have weathered multiple crises and cooperated in important areas of technology, trade, and human rights. America must stay true to our values and remain consistent in our support for the people of Taiwan, who share America's people's desire to live in peace, freedom, and democracy. I felt our meeting today provided a greater peace and stability for the world. America's support for the people of Taiwan will remain resolute, unwavering, and bipartisan. It is my honor to introduce to you the next speaker to come before us, the chairman of the Democratic Party, a fellow colleague from California. And for all those with camera, please take the view behind us, because I don't think California has ever looked so beautiful. Congressman Pete Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank President Tsai for the meaningful conversation today, and on behalf of the House Democratic Caucus, we offered our continued partnership and cooperation as we seek to grow our economic ties. Speaker McCarthy, on behalf of this bipartisan delegation assembled behind us, I want to thank you for facilitating this meeting and for fostering this bipartisan engagement. In matters of foreign policy, as the Speaker mentioned, it's important for us to set aside partisanship and work together to promote our common interests and the interests of the free world. In the 40 years since the Taiwan Relations Act has passed, the partnership between the United States and Taiwan has been rooted in the pillars of security, shared economic interests, and democracy. I told President Tsai that the House Democrats will never abandon this relationship and will work hand in glove with the Biden administration to affirm our commitment, because we understand the unique role and vital role that Taiwan plays in the region. We welcome competition with the People's Republic of China, but do not seek conflict. The work we do in Congress will seek to promote the safety and security of the Indo-Pacific region while protecting American interests and the interests of our allies and partners. We look forward to this meeting and more meetings like this in the future, and the continued cooperation together. I want to thank the bipartisan nature of this delegation and introduce Chairman Gallagher of the Select Committee of the Strategic Competition of the CCP.
Thank the Speaker. I thank all of my colleagues for being here today. What a special experience. President Reagan once said, "If some of you fear taking a stand because you're afraid of reprisals, recognize that you're just feeding the crocodile, hoping that he will eat you last." Watching some of the coverage leading up to President Tsai's visit, I've been thinking about Reagan's crocodile. Some who failed to learn from decades of CCP behavior have been wringing their hands, wondering if we're being too provocative. But I would submit to you that if the duly elected leader of one of our most important Democratic partners can't meet with American leaders on American soil, then we're merely feeding the crocodile that will eventually eat us. We must not be intimidated. And Speaker McCarthy and this bipartisan delegation are here today to send a simple message, and that's we are not afraid. We support our friends in Taiwan. We're going to keep saying that whenever we have the opportunity, and we're going to turn those words into action this Congress, bipartisan action, because Taiwan is a small but very bright candle burning at the edge of a vast authoritarian darkness. It's a testament to something President Reagan said in front of the Brandenburg Gate. He said, "There stands before the entire world one great and inescapable conclusion. Freedom leads to prosperity. Freedom replaces the ancient hatreds among nations with comedy and peace. Freedom is the victor." And with that, I am proud to introduce my good friend and ranking member on the Select Committee on the CCP, Raja Krishnamurthy.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, Speaker McCarthy, for convening this bipartisan meeting. Thank you, Chairman Aguilar, for leading our House Democratic Caucus, being present. Thank you to all of my fellow members. And of course, thank you to the Reagan Foundation for hosting us in a wonderful visit. We had a wonderful set of meetings with President Tsai, and it reminded me of something that actually President Reagan said 40 years ago at the 40th founding of the United Nations. He asked the following question. He said, what kind of a people do we want to be 40 years from now? Well, today, we can agree with what he said should be the answer, which is that we want to be a free people, firm in the conviction that freedom is not the sole prerogative of a chosen few, but rather the entitlement of all of God's children. In that regard, Taiwan deserves to be free. Taiwan's people deserve freedom, and they have earned that right. The CCP has promised that if they reunify with Taiwan, they will provide a one China, two systems policy. In Hong Kong, we've seen such a policy in name being implemented. Unfortunately to us, and to many others, it looks like a one China, one system policy. And freedom, unfortunately, has not been compatible with that one system. And so that's why our bond with the Taiwanese people is unshakable. We will always support them in defending their freedom. And to our strategic competitors in the CCP, we say to them with one voice, we do not want war. We don't want a cold war. We don't want a hot war. We don't want any hostilities whatsoever. We want peace. We are a peace-loving people. But we want a durable peace, and we must deter aggression at all costs. We must peacefully resolve all differences between and among us at the bargaining table. So with that said, I want to say thank you so much, and I want to now welcome Chairman Smith of the Ways and Means Committee to address us.
This is such a special day, being at the Reagan Library, but it's a special occasion, and we have to thank Speaker McCarthy for organizing this event and each one of our colleagues that's here, Republicans and Democrats. It shows how important this is to our nation and how important it is to Congress, that we were able to have such a constructive bilateral conversation with the President of Taiwan, talking about our relationship from an economic perspective, but also from a security perspective, and the results of how we can continue to partner and work together moving forward. I think there's going to be a lot of benefits from this meeting. Happy to give all the tough questions to Speaker McCarthy.
Before we begin questions, let me just say one thing. I want to thank all the members who came. They came from different parts of the country, from different parties, from different committees, with one goal. That's to bring peace throughout the world, but bring a greater foster of a relationship with the people of Taiwan. I respect the job that you're all going to do, but let me put one caveat for you. Today was a very important day on the subject we talked about. I know you'll try to ask me questions about a lot of other subjects. Leave that for another day. Today I'll only entertain questions about this meeting and we'll hear. Yes? We'll give you microphones too, so you'll be heard.
Thank you so much. Andrea Mitchell from NBC News. And it's remarkable to see this bipartisan gathering. And I was at the Brandenburg Gate with President Reagan and covered that. So this is quite a moment. Let me ask you, do you worry, Mr. Speaker, that you will escalate tensions with Beijing?
No, it's not our intention to escalate. We want to continue to build and foster democracy and freedom. And there should be no fear. I mean, the uniqueness here, what I would think around the world, not very often does the world see Republicans and Democrats standing together on one issue. You know, when I first became Speaker, I sat down with Leader Hakeem, and we talked about this issue. And I said, I think some of the challenges that we have had with China have been part of the challenges that America has not spoken with one voice. We may have given conflicting views from going from administration to administration. I think what would bring and foster a stronger relationship is that Congress speak with one voice. And you found earlier this year when a balloon traveled across this country, 100% of Congress voted together on a resolution. And I think today you found that we sat down with the President, united, talking about how we foster peace further. And the number one thing I see of how you create peace is you communicate. You communicate with one another, whether you be foe or friend. And that's something that we see different today.
You're also reporting that the balloon did gather intelligence, what the administration said. What do you respond to that?
From my understanding, that was the purpose of the balloon itself. And I think that's why you found Congress speaking with one voice. It doesn't matter what country that comes from. It should not be allowed to go over our airspace and gather with the technology that it has today, and we'll figure more about that, and there might be ramifications further based upon what the actions were taken. But thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Josh Campbell with CNN. I have a clarification and then a question, if I may. Yesterday in Bakersfield, you did an interview and you described China as a country that is very important. A very important country was the quote. And I'm just curious, given the sensitivity of that word country, was that purposeful? And then second, I'm just curious, obviously we're here at the Reagan Library. We've heard President Reagan mentioned several times today he was impactful on your career. In a different place and time, when the Soviet Union was the adversary, he was asked what his strategy was, and he said it's simple. We win, they lose.
4 words.
I'm wondering, in the modern era, with China increasingly described as an adversary, is that your view as it relates to China? We win, they lose.
No, I think when you look to America, the world wins when we have peace. The world wins when we have respect for one another. The world wins when we have more democracy and more freedom. It was only fitting that we had this meeting here. Look, I believe in the 3 communiques. I also believe in the 6 assurances. That has not changed one iota. But I do believe in fostering a greater relationship and sitting here and understanding what the world looks like before Ronald Reagan took power and what the world looked like afterwards. And it wasn't just Reagan, it was other leaders around the world who stood, of Lech Wałęsa. There were 2 Germanys. We watched a Margaret Thatcher. We watched those who stood for freedom, stood for democracy, wasn't based upon a party. The world became a safer place. Authoritarian lost. But what I see today around the world is disturbing. And I think that unites. And the one thing I would take pride in as an American, you're watching your lawmakers stand together with both parties, advocating greater democracy, with a plan to help deter any chance of a war in the future. And what we learned from Reagan, peace through strength, trust but verify, respect your adversary. We've watched Reagan go when he spoke about the Soviet Union, but he went to the Soviet Union. He built a relationship. And we've watched the changes that could be brought. So, look, I do not change from the 3 communiques, where they are. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alex Michelson from Fox 11. I'm curious, what is it about this issue in particular that is bringing you all together, where on so many other issues there's so much division? And also, just as a bottom line question, what is your message to China, who's threatening retaliation for doing this today?
Well, my first message to China, there's no need for retaliation. But the one thing I would say to China, too, at no time, I am the Speaker of the House. There's no place that China is going to tell me where I can go or who I can speak to, whether you be foe or whether you be friend. I'm not the general manager of the Houston Rockets. And the one thing I hope all countries see is that we're united in this same approach, together, on both sides. And we're going to speak with one voice when it comes to China or any others when we look at foreign policy. One of my goals as Speaker is to take away the things that become so partisan. Not everything has to be partisan. I respect people on the other side of the aisle that have a different philosophical belief, but when it comes to peace, freedom, and democracy, I think that unites us. When we watch what's happening in the world today, a movement and a gathering, it looks like a little of a new axis of power. I think back to what could have the lawmakers done then, that never took place in the 30s. So today we're looking at to make sure that we have peace going on decades in the future. I think it's fitting that you're here under Reagan's library. This is what he advocated in a world that was dangerous. He advocated peace, and he found a way to do it. That same place here. So for a China should not fear. A China should engage with us. And I think from a point of view from Congress, I think we have a responsibility to speak with one voice, and we're doing that. And that should be a greater relationship with China at the same time with Taiwan. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, Leslie Liao, Taiwan Plus News. First of all, on behalf of Tsai Ing-wen's traveling press pool, I would like to thank you for giving us the opportunity for being here. That said, one of the messages that you keep telling us during this press conference is that you will not allow China to dictate where you can and can't go. Just out of my own curiosity, are there any plans for you to come to Taiwan, or, is there any desire?
I don't have any current plans, but that doesn't mean I will not go. And if there comes a time that I go, I would not go as one party only. And I would not go for a simple purpose for myself in that basis. And it wouldn't be in an adversarial role or others. But I thought as President Tsai transited through America, it's a unique opportunity to bring that dialogue. And I think the world is a safer place for it. And communication matters, regardless of whether people have differences of opinion. And I think today is going to foster greater peace long term. Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes. 40 years ago, President Reagan signed a one-China policy. Now, 40 years later, here, are you Congress going to shut down the one-China policy?
Well, when you talk about one China policy, I think you're confusing which president was involved during that time. That was President Nixon. And we have no difference of opinion. That's continuing the three communiques you'd be referring to. Under President Reagan, you'd be talking about the 6 assurances with Taiwan. That is currently American policy, and that is still American policy, and that's the policy that we support here. Yes. I'll go to you next. No, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Andrew Desiderio from Punchbowl News. I'm wondering if you could talk about your sense of President Tsai's assessment of how imminent an actual attack or invasion from China might be at this point, and what she specifically asked for from Congress in terms of military assistance, economic assistance, things you guys can do in the NDAA or through the China Select Committee. Thank you.
Let me be very clear. We advocate that day never comes. And if we've learned anything from Ukraine, there's actions that could have been taken 5 years ago, so Ukraine never had. Deterring that action to take place would have saved thousands of lives. I think today is a part of that. We've always had with the 6 assurances that we could supply weapons to Taiwan, that they could defend themselves, that war would not be created. They have purchased a number of weapons from America. Some have been delayed. I think one of the things that we had talked about, how could we speed that up in the process? I think you have a commitment from both sides here to make sure that happens. How can we build more trade, economics? I think that helps along the way as well. I would hope that as lawmakers, our goal is to make sure those days don't happen. And I think we should learn from what's happened in the past. I would take it, and I want to give a lot of credit to Hakeem Jeffries. When I sat down with him when I first became Speaker, we talked about this Select Committee. And the goal of this Select Committee is to speak with one voice. And I have been very impressed with the chairman and the ranking member of how they carried about themselves. And this isn't the only meeting that a number of them are going to do. They're going to go throughout California, meeting in others. And part of the Select Committee is finding places in America so we're not dependent on other countries, be it critical minerals, be it medical. Making America stronger makes the world safer. And that's the unique goal that all of us have, and that's what we're working towards. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, you've talked at great length about the importance of the unity of this delegation and the bipartisanship, the bipartisan nature of it. But today, as you're meeting here with the Taiwanese president, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, is in Beijing meeting with Chinese leaders. What do those conflicting messages mean for the strength of this message and for your approach to China? And then, if you can comment on yesterday's indictments, that would be great too.
Well, first of all, I don't think what Macron's doing is conflicting here. From the same point that I tell China, they cannot tell me who I can meet with. For the same argument that I said, this meeting will foster greater freedoms, right? It's communication. So I think it's great that Macron is meeting in China. I hope he delivers a message not to fund Russia's war in Ukraine. I hope he delivers a message that democracy makes the world safer and stronger. I hope he delivers a message that Americans meeting with President Tsai is positive for the same aspect that he is meeting with President Xi. I've been to China 3 times. I think greater communications between nations are positive. I think trying to show military actions is not. Communications are stronger. And the answer to your second question is no. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Susanna Luthi with the Washington Free Beacon. You mentioned that one of the topics you discussed was boosting arms sales to Taiwan. What's your plan to do so, considering the White House is signaling reluctance to upset Beijing? And then secondly, are you at all concerned that during Taiwan's next presidential election, a more Beijing-friendly candidate could win?
Look, one thing I believe in democracy, and let them have a say in the process and decide who wants to lead them and have an open and honest and fair debate without others advocating inside. I don't get the same approach from this administration. I think this administration, and my communications with them too, see the importance of speeding up the weapon delivery system. So I'm not feeling the same differences based upon your question. And I do believe in the motto of President Reagan, peace through strength, and I think deterring. If I just sit back and I look at what transpired in Ukraine, I remember coming back from Ukraine in 2015 and advocating to sell them javelins. Javelins, a defensive weapon to stop the tanks from coming in. And maybe had that action been taken or others, Russia would not have felt that that was a mode for them to go through and thousands of lives would have been saved. And I think this is no different than what the 6 assurances have said from Reagan, that we would supply Taiwan with weapons. And we didn't set a timeline to the one China. So it's carrying out the exact same policy we have had for decades. And I believe in that motion if we're able to do it. They've already made the sales. It's the delivery of the system. And I think from that same action, if people would have taken that action in Ukraine, the world would be safer. And I think that's an action that we should take. And I believe, I'm not going to put words in anybody's mouth, but with our discussions, I believe that is a bipartisan position. And I would think, I'm not going to speak for the administration, but from my conversations with the administration, that's the same feeling I've had back from them as well. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm Hein from the Taiwan PTS. Speaker, I want will you invite President Tsai to the Congress to get a speech, or any possible to let the Taiwan president visit Washington, D.C.? Thank you.
I don't have any invitation out there right now. Today we were able to meet her as she transits through America, and I thought that was very productive. Yes, sir.
Hi, Mr. Speaker. Michael Martina from Reuters. President Tsai has just returned from Latin America. Taiwan has been losing allies around the world slowly, including recently Honduras. I'm curious if you think that the United States is doing enough to stop that, if you even think it's the United States' business to step in or say to Taiwan's allies that they should remain with Taiwan.
I think that's one of the reasons the president was out communicating with others. I have a fear of some of these nations changing their positions based upon a hope and dream of financial support for some infrastructure. We have found at times when China has done that, those nations have become in a more economic challenging time, maybe a dam not working in Ecuador, maybe becoming under financial burdens. So I truly believe that all nations should look at where it is and make a decision. I wish all nations would make a decision based upon democracy and freedom and peace. If that's the decision at the end of the day, or the determination, I have no fear of where people would make their decision. Yes, sir.
Mike Flood with AP. I heard what you said about the weapons and also trade, but are there other areas where you think the administration could be acting more aggressively in toughening policy with China? Also, do you think that the country should specifically commit to the defense of Taiwan should China attempt anything militarily?
Look, I know everyone puts these hypotheticals out there. Our goal is that hypothetical never comes to fruition. And what we know through history, the best way to do that is supply the weapons to allow people to deter war. Supply the weapons that people could defend themselves. It is a critical lesson that we learned through Ukraine, that the idea of just sanctions in the future is not going to stop somebody, but deterrent of being able to self-control is going to stop that. Your first part of your question, remind me again what it was?
Yes, should the administration be doing more in terms of toughening its policy to China beyond what you mentioned, the arms sales and also trade?
Well, the one thing I always believe, you should keep communication going. I think from policymakers here, the more that we're able to speak with one voice, I think the greater understanding China would understand where we stand, but more importantly, it would help them to understand, don't send a balloon over our airspace. Don't use authoritarian bully tactics, is not going to go far. We want to have peace. We want to have economics with you. We want to be able to grow like we had for a number of years together, and we want to continue to foster that. We respect your position. We respect the nature of your country, but the same part is you've got to respect democracy, freedom, and peace. And the idea of America in the last number of years of flip-flopping through administrations, I think, had sent the wrong message to China. I remember my first time traveling to China in 1995. I remember going to Tiananmen Square, and there was a sign there, and it had two numbers. The number of days and the number of minutes to Hong Kong came under control. I remember the promises made that China did to Hong Kong, that they could keep their own version of democracy and others, and for 50 years, and they reneged on that. And I think that harmed them around the world. And I think if they understood that, we watched them shut down newspapers and freedom of press that have been there for decades. And I think when the world stays silent on those issues, that's what fosters a problem that gets you to that hypothetical. When you speak with honesty and integrity and you come forth in one voice, and especially the responsibility America has, that makes the world safer. And that's why, if there was a place to meet, it was here today. This isn't a lesson, and I'm proud of the fact that you see Democrats and Republicans. Democrats didn't budge and say, oh, you're going to Ronald Reagan's presidential library, because it wasn't about Republicans. It was the foundation of the idea of America standing for freedom and peace and democracy. It was the idea of those policies that America took during the Cold War and others. That the world is safer based upon what America took those policies on now. And as we look to what the world looks like today, I think this is the right place, the right time, and the right members to be together. Yes, ma'am.
I am Tsai Ing-wen from Taiwan's media. I want to ask a question is about some representatives propose to build state-to-state relations between U.S. and Taiwan, or they say U.S. should normalize Taiwan-U.S. relations. What do you think about it?
I don't see any change to our 3 communiques and our 6 assurance today, no. Yes, sir. Yeah. Okay. I think when you look today, just fostering greater relationships, I think when you sit here today, sitting at the Reagan Library with the 6 assurances, that continues to build. And what I look to is, I understand the premise of your question, but our goal here is that we have peace throughout the world. And we understand where the world is today, and I think today helps us foster that further with committing to those 6 assurances of where we go, and I think the world will be safer for it. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Catherine Hiller from the Financial Times. We've heard a lot about unwavering support for Taiwan today. Now, if there were a Chinese attack, do you think the American people would be okay with America sending troops or really stepping in to defend Taiwan? Thank you.
Look, that's a hypothetical question that we never want to get to. The reason why we're together here with both parties sitting down is because we never want to see that question really get asked. We never want to see that to come to fruition. And we understand through history. We understand through the history of what Ronald Reagan would do and others, that day you do not want to have happen. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. And how do you deter that? You foster a greater relationship about peace, freedom, and democracy. You deter the ability for one side to create war. You stick to the 3 communiques and the 6 assurances. That has fostered peace and grown economics on every side of the aisle, be it Taiwan, be it China, be it America. So that is what we're doing today. So when you look back on history, in a critical time around the world, what did your lawmakers do? They stood up. They built relationships to friend and foe. They deterred the ability for one to foster war against the other. They built economic ties with both. And they fostered a greater relationship for freedom and for peace around the world, because no one wants to get to a hypothetical question she just asked. I thank you for spending your time with us today. I thank the members for spending time here. This won't be our last discussion about this, and we'll continue to foster and grow, because it won't all be solved today. But thank you and God bless. Have a very happy Easter.